Today I've got a fun and interesting tech-based mod known as Biomancy. It's a very weird and disgusting mod, but it's also quite interesting and very actually well made so far. It is in some form of beta stage, so there are some weird little issues that will probably be changed over time, so always be aware of that. But without further ado, let's get into the showcase itself. To get started with the Biomancy part of this mod, you'll need to get yourself a tool known as the Fleshy Plunger. This will require one special item from this mod known as the Primordial Core. In order to craft one of those, you'll need 4 E-pearls, an eye of a spider, as well as 1 raw meat piece of every different passive mob that you'll find on the surface: a pig, sheep, cow, as well as a chicken. Once you create yourself a primordial core, you can then combine it with 3 bones as well as 2 raw meats of your choice in a crafting table to create the Fleshy Plunger, the useful weapon and tool of this mod that will gain you access to various new things. The biggest reason you want to make this weapon / tool is that it gives you access to a new drop that will drop from a majority of mobs in the game when you use this weapon to kill them, and that is various different flesh pieces. Depending on the mob you kill will depend on what type of flesh piece you get. For example, most fleshy monsters that you kill, such as pigs or any other form of hostile mobs, anything with flesh attached to them, you'll get yourself some sinew. If you kill, let's say, something like a skeleton, you get some bone marrow, and various other things like that. Like a wolf will drop you some fangs possibly, or some claws, but can also drop some sinew or some bile, and various different other things. In total, there are 8 different fleshy pieces that you can collect that will be used to build various different machineries and tools in this mod. The first machine of which you'll want to make is something known as a Primordial Cradle. This is a machine that is created using one of those primordial cores, 5 different raw meats, as well as 2 sharp fangs. To make use of the Primordial Cradle, you fill it up with some raw meat, kind of in the same way you would put stuff into a composter until it's full. It will get angry at you when you do so, but don't worry about it. You can then give it some regeneration potions in order to make its eye glow, and then it will create yourself a flesh blob, a very interestingly disgusting looking creature. When killed, these flesh blobs will drop living flesh. You can also feed it raw meat in order to increase its size, either by right-clicking the meat on the actual mob itself or just throwing the item onto the ground. At its largest size, this blob can be taller than the average Minecraft player, and when killed will drop 6 total living flesh rather than 1, ultimately making it worthwhile to feed about 5, 6, 7 different pieces of raw meat into the flesh blob to get more out of it before you go and make another one. If you mix in some spider eyes or some sharp fangs into the Primordial Cradle when you're putting your meat in, it will create a hungry flesh blob instead. This guy is a little bit ferocious and he'll start attacking you as he's chasing down some meat. If you leave him alone, he'll also chase down other passive mobs such as cows, pigs, sheep, and chicken of the like, and eat their meat in order to grow as well. If you mix in some living flesh inside the Primordial Cradle when you're crafting some blobs out of it, you'll get a Maglin flesh blob, which will not grow in size without the amount of meat it eats, will attack every other type of flesh blob you usually create through the Primordial Cradle, and when it dies will leave some fleshy veins on top of the block it died upon. If you feed rotten flesh into the Primordial Cradle and then power it up, it will send out spikes on the side of the block, as well as putting more of this flesh on top of the blocks surrounding it. The next piece of machinery in this mod is the Decomposer. This has a very simple crafting recipe of 4 pieces of raw meat, living flesh, a biogand, as well as some sharp fangs. This is probably going to be the most used piece of machinery in this mod, as it's useful to decomposing items down to some different various forms that will be used for other crafting recipes later down the line. This machine gets fueled by various different food sources, each one just adding in various different amounts of fuel to the fuel system, but this fuel system takes a lot of use in order to actually burn through it, because this will only use 1 Newton power every time it goes to consume an item, and this can hold upwards of 1,000 Newton powers based upon the food that you throw in there. There are over 153 different items that can be thrown through the Decomposer, so it's highly advised that you use JEI or various other mods like that in order to find out all the various items that can be thrown in there. They also can take various different amounts of times. Let's say, for example, dirt can be done almost immediately, but if you try to decompose an enchantment golden apple, it can take a very long time for it to decompose that item. Now that we've created the piece of machinery that will create all the items that we need to craft some beautiful flesh-based items, now we need the tool to allow us to do so. This piece of machinery is known as the Bioforge, and effectively speaking, it is the crafting table for this mod. When you right-click into the interface, you'll see all the various different recipes that have been crafted with the various different decomposed items that you will gain via the previous machine. This pretty much varies from a majority of the different type of flesh type blocks. As you can see on the wall over here, got various different interesting things. I'm going to go through some of the more interesting ones for you now. First, you've got the flesh spikes. This is a very interesting thing. You can place one on the ground, it'll be a single spike, or you can right click another, or even 3 into it to make bigger bunches of spikes. These spikes will do continuous damage to whatever's walking over the top of it. This can be used against as traps against yourself, or even other mobs that you can use to walk around in order to train into some pain that will ultimately end up killing them. There's also cool variations of typical Minecraft blocks you'll use, such as a really cool animated chest, as well as some doors and some pressure plates that might be far more useful, ladders and other bits and pieces like that, as well as a really cool hopper known as the More Hopper, which is far more efficient in use when it comes to hoppering things around. Instead of it doing 1 at a time, it'll do 16 at a time. Unfortunately though, this doesn't quite work with the actual flesh chests with this mod at this point in time, though I'm sure that's something that's going to change in the future. There's also this funny little mouth thing which will just take items inside of a chest, spit them out into the ground for no other reason aside from it can. It's just a thing that's there, you know? Next we have a living weapon known as the Ravenous Claws. This has got multiple different things. First off, its durability is run off of nutrients. You can use any form of raw meat in order to heal it back up. You've also got this thing called a blood charge. Every time you kill a mob, you'll get a various different amounts of blood charge. For example, killing a chicken, you'll gain 5. Once you get up to a certain point, you can press V to turn it into the awakened weaponing variation, which gives you 2 new abilities. Bleed protection adds 1 bleed stack every time you hit, as well as a blood explosion, as on a bleed stack deals 10% of max health as damage, a continuous bleeding effect on any mob that you actually hit. Then you've got the digester. This item is kind of like some form of flower pot, except for it's made out of goddamn flesh, and this can be just used to create various different fuel resources for the various other machines. Basically, you can put in a bunch of food for fuel, and then you can turn like your useless fuel, for example, your poisonous potatoes, it will consume it and turn it down into its nutritious product form, which can be just used as other forms of fuel. You can even use it for food if you so think about doing that. You convert it to other nutrients, convert it into a nutrient bar, which can actually be very useful for food. Let's say you just got a surplus of useless food. Again, puffer fish, rotten flesh, potatoes, the poisonous potatoes, the stuff that you can't really eat normally because they give you other negative effects. You can just use the digester to turn them into positive affecting foods that will just give you hunger and nothing else. And for the final piece of machinery that you can craft using the Bioforge is we've got the Bio Lab. Now this is the most interesting piece of machinery that we have access to, as it can be used to create multiple levels of different various effects that you can give not only to other mobs and creatures but to yourself. When creating these type of additives and potions that you can use on other mobs, it is actually a multi-level process that requires various different levels of alchemy processing to craft various different items that will be all ultimately combined together to craft your various different additives. In order to make use of these serums, you need to get yourself a Bio-Injector. When using a Bio-Injector, you can press V whilst holding it in order to inject any form of serum into the injector itself. You can use these in serums by right-clicking on the mob of choice or by shift right-clicking in order to inject the serum on yourself. There are a total of 8 different serums that you can create. You have the Rejuvenation Serum, which will de-age any form of mob that you use this upon. There is also an Aging Serum, which will have the opposite effect, aging up a mob. Of course, this is all at the cost of a little bit of damage. There is also a thing called the Breeding Serum, which can be used on mobs that can breed in order to encourage a lot of breeding. Do be wary though, as every time you do use this tool on any of these mobs, it will cause them a little bit of harm, so they will be running around for a bit before they start breeding and other things along those lines. You can use an Enlargement Serum in order to increase the size of a slime, magma cube, or any of the 2 various fleshy blobs that you can create yourself, and there's also a Shrinking Serum that will do the opposite effect. And then the 3 various serums for yourself. You first got the Absorption Serum, which when you hit yourself with it will give you 4 hearts of absorption. There is a Cleansing Serum, which can be used as effectively the same thing as milk, but it can also be used to clear off effects that usually wouldn't be taken away by drinking milk. And then you've also got the Insomnia Serum. Let's say in cases where you don't have access to a bed or you just can't be stuffed dealing with phantoms, the Insomnia Serum will reset your insomnia stuff so you don't have to worry about phantoms spawning. And that is Biomancy. What are your thoughts on this beautiful fleshy mob? And if you did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers at some point in the future. Click this mod video on screen now for more mod madness, and until next time, bye bye!